I'm here. Hi. I just came back from a 2-week trip to Detroit, which was very inspiring, and I spent some time there on Philo of Alexandria, who LaRouche takes up in his recent paper Beyond Sense Perception, and of course, in several before that one in a recent period, and of course, reaching back many years. Specifically on the dichotomy between Philo and Euclid. So that's what we're going to look at here. And I want to emphasize something that I definitely was thinking about in Detroit, which is the challenge of keeping your eyes on the enemy. Because we're engaged in a war of the mind. We're all soldiers in a battle that takes place, the battlefield is in the mind. We are fighting an empire, and no one in this room should kid themselves and think that we're just out here fighting Obama, that this is some kind of populist battle, that we're attempting to bring down a figure in history, and that that's the point. What we're fighting for is the eradication of systems on the earth that are governed by the principle of oligarchy. We're attempting to destroy the impact and the effect of the oligarchical principle upon the governments of the earth. Ron, do you have a place to sit down? Yeah, we need a... Okay. Yeah, come on over. You can, okay, whatever. There's one more empty space at the front if anyone needs it. I just silenced my cell phone if anyone else needs to do that. So I have found this inquiry to be extremely fruitful for myself in terms of subjective discovery of how is it that I think. When we talk about public opinion being this completely worthless, stupid thing that we're constantly having to we're having to upheave. It's not just sort of ossified notions. It's not just sort of reified ideas about such and such as this, such and such as that. It's not just an assemblage of facts that are false. What it is an entire methodology of thinking that is flawed from the very root. And so I'm going to get into it right here with Philo. Because, I mean, one of the things that blew my mind when I started reading LaRouche and that got me engaged to say, wow, I actually live in universal history. I don't live in this Francis Fukuyama world, the end of history, where we just live in a postmodern wasteland. That's falsehood. Even though I had believed that for years. Oh, okay. We live in the post-apocalyptic age where there's no meaning at all. That was something that I genuinely believed for years of my life. And then I started to read LaRouche. My mind was hungry for more, and my human quality of love of mankind. There was a spark there that I kept alive, and I started to read LaRouche, and I saw that we're in a battle that stretches back, and LaRouche has recently indicated, in particular, to the siege of Troy as a time period, as a particular historical event at which these methods were put into place, and that we began what exists for the past thousands of years as a gambling system that exists as our economy, as our social structure, in a sense. That's really where there we go. There's the root of it. Philo was a scholar of the Hebrew Bible. He was known as being a friend of the apostles Peter and Paul. Personally, I know very little about his biography. I'm no expert on any of that. I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert on the scriptures, on any, so there's a lot that I really don't know at this point. But I wanted to take this opportunity of this class. My purpose is to bring to you passages from a work by Philo called On Creation, bring to you passages from LaRouche's recent works, including an excerpt of a weekly report from about a week and a half ago. And actually, I guess it's the one from 2.5 weeks ago. And I want to knit all this together with the political scene today, so that we can have an idea of what subjectively, so that you can take in these ideas, explore them further, and consider for yourself what are my own methodologies of thinking, ones that I thought they were mine. I thought this was just how I think. I thought that was just me. But you come to discover this very method is something that has been enforced on me by the oligarchy. And it's nothing new, something that they've been doing for 2,000 years. And so we should just put it in the trash can. So here's Philo of Alexandria and the Intelligible Universe, the Methodology of Oligarchy. And here's a photo of Philo from back then. Okay. So this is just some crude drawing that I found on Google Images that is supposed to represent the Library of Alexandria. So Philo was working in the Library of Alexandria, and Lynn has spoken about, and as I said, I know very little about this, but about the certain events that took place at the library where the type of thought that we are here today discussing was squashed, was put to the side, was even potentially burned in the intentionally in the burning of the library, and instead was replaced with a canon of Euclid, essentially. So this is stuff I'm very interested to learn more about. But we'll see. Here's another image of the library. Clearly, they loved learning. They had a real philosophy, a love of wisdom. Those are some heavy scrolls right there. Okay. So I have two parts to this presentation. The first one I sort of wanted to take aside is the principle of mind. And I find this to be an incredibly powerful way of looking at the world and thinking subjectively about thought and about creation. So I start with a lengthy quote from LaRouche's "The World's Breakdown Crisis is Now." I don't have the date on this, I sort of forget, but it's from the recent period. It's from the past month or so. So in this, he lays out the difference between Euclid and Philo, and this is what we're going to investigate at first. That much said, we must emphasize included attention to highly relevant other earlier avenues of pathological thinking, such as the mental illness represented by what is often identified as by me and others as the Aristotelian cult of Euclid, which continues to play a significantly destructive role in the mental life of what often seems mistakenly to pass for science. The pathological trend inhering in Euclid's system was exposed and condemned publicly by that friend of the Christian apostle Peter, who was sometimes known as Philo of Alexandria. This also has a significance in science for reason of that fraud of Euclid's role as a morally degrading factor of distraction from a competent scientific method. Those ironies of the fraud of Euclid, notably since the death of Eratosthenes, are of exemplary historical clinical interest for us here on that account. So I would indicate something that is clear, that I'm sure is obvious to everyone in this room, is that why is it important to root out these oligarchical methodologies from within our own thinking? It's because they are morally degrading. So that's how you get extinction. According to Philo, the still chronic relevant thesis of Euclid worked to the effect of asserting that the existence of mankind could not have existed until the creator of the universe were already dead. That same thesis of God is dead is associated with the radically reductionist modern figure of Friedrich Nietzsche and consistent fascists, as also worshippers of the tradition of the Olympian Zeus generally. Those chronic errors are derivatives of the so-called oligarchical principle. So, key is that these errors are derivatives of the oligarchical principle. So if we eradicate the principle, then we can get rid of the errors, because they won't make sense anymore. So this is what we're fighting here, is that the God is dead thesis comes from the oligarchical principle. And that's essential for us to wrap our heads around. Life is, after all, as the referenced work of Wilhelm Furtwängler attests, the essence of creativity and of true love of the universal passion of creativity as such. Life is, after all, as the referenced work of Wilhelm Furtwängler attests, the essence of creativity and of true love of the universal passion of creativity as such. This is a statement that we're going to sort of address over the course of this presentation. We're going to look at what does he mean by that, and how does that impact us subjectively. Just as a side note, if you've been watching the weekly reports, if you've been reading the recent papers, you're familiar with Lynn's emphasis on classical music, and in particular on Furtwängler. So I won't go into that, but he was a composer, a German composer, who was active in the early half of in the first half of the 20th century, and later. And you should definitely listen to what he does. Okay, but we're not gonna talk about him today. The systemic fallacy permeating that reductionist's fallacy, which I have addressed in the preceding paragraphs, is the fruit of a reductionist fallacy rooted in the elementary error, such as that both Bertrand Russell and A.I. Oparin represented by the substitution of an ill-conceived notion of sense perception per se for the ontological content of what is presumed to have been the common expression of the living and the dead alike. Excuse me. So this is challenging to parse. But by the end of this, I think we'll have a much better understanding of what it is that he's trying to convey here.
Just define one thing.
Yes.
Ontological.
Ontological. So your ontology is your study of what is, in a sense. It's like your very basis for discussing anything. First, you have to know what you mean by your language. By what do we mean when we say such and such is? That's the best thing I could say right now. And sort of break that up for you, what we mean is that you have the ill-conceived notion of sense perception per se. This is the Aristotelian cult of Euclid and others who say that sense perceptions, they're all that exist. That there isn't something higher about the universe. There is simply what you see before you. And that's an ontological flaw. It's a fallacy. And it is inherent, or it is expressed in this what by Oparin. We're not going to go in depth into this, but it's worth mentioning. Oparin was someone who said, "Oh, I know what life is. Life can be described in these following ways. It corresponds to these certain parameters, and life emerged from non-living matter. That you had just a bunch of chemicals, and if you have the right group of chemicals, all of a sudden there's life, and that it works in that forwards time space. And we're going to bust that down, and we're going to show that the higher principle of the universe is ordered such that we have human creativity as the subsuming principle of the entire universe. Below that you have life, living, the biosphere, that which is living, biotic, that is matter, and lesser than that, that is a level below that, you have the abiotic. So what they have here is they have got everything flipped upside down. This is the fraud of bottom-up thinking. And they're thinking, okay, well, you start with dirt, and then from dirt you get a human child. And this is what we're upending here. And then we're saying, actually, you've got your entire understanding of mankind's relationship to creation, you've got it absolutely backwards. And so that's what we're taking on. It's a challenge, and I'm going to do my best. And please interrupt me with questions, and we'll do our best to work through it, because it's not. This isn't something that I've studied in depth, but it is what Lynn has put before us, that we must immediately take up and utilize and incorporate, internalize, such that we can achieve victory, and that we can take down the oligarchical principle. So I want to return to this at the end of the presentation, but here what we're establishing is the fraud of bottom-up thinking. This is what part one is about. This is what the principle of mind is about. So here is Philo. Oh, and here's a really good introduction. I'm going to show just about a 5-minute clip from Lynn and Jason Ross talking about Philo. And actually speaking mostly about Euclid. So you can see what Euclid does that is bottom-up and fraudulent. Oh, shoot. I can pull it up here, though. That is bottom-up and fraudulent about geometry. That's what he does with geometry that is the same thing that Oparin does with biology. Okay.
Hello. Is the point that if you want to live as a human being, be a mensch. Join the future. Get into the future. Be part of building the future. Be a mensch. Endlich.
There's an existence in the future. Like, people who can't understand how the future differs from the past in a way that's different than just being the opposite aren't going to be able to understand, this musical question, aren't going to be able to understand science. Because, just the correlation between this and then what Riemann did, where, he definitely saw development as primary. He saw creativity as the primary substance, not the present, but what the direction, the creation of the future. That was what was most real. And obviously,
Do you see how that applies, friend, to the, yeah, so.
That means that you're not building the future. You didn't build the present from the past. You didn't build it up from pieces. There's something that's drawing you from the future. And in terms of getting beyond the senses altogether, because you have, I just want to take up as an example, going back to Riemann's habilitation dissertation, which is like the key work in physics of the 19th century, where you take they have to go into a little bit of geometry to sort of set the stage for this a little bit. But in Egypt, Greece, people studying, the relations between shapes and things like this started to develop, a whole geometry of different axioms and conclusions and things like this. What ended up happening was people were seeking for the most basic assumptions from which everything else would follow. That ended up being Euclid's approach, where Euclid took all of the discoveries of Greek science and then sort of turned it into he formalized it. And formalism is evil, because instead of presenting discoveries as where they came from the process of mind that created them, he said, no, we're going to start with sort of basic geometric hypotheses and show how everything actually follows from geometry rather than from the mind. So in laying out his basic definitions and axioms and whatnot, one of them, the fifth postulate, caused a lot of trouble for the future. This is basically the one that says that you can have parallel lines. It's possible to have two lines that just go next to each other and will never meet even if you extend them infinitely. Now, obviously, no one had ever checked. No one had gone to infinity to see if this was right. And you can, it's actually not true. Let's say you had a city where the streets were laid out in an east-west grid, and you and a friend are on parallel streets and you're both going north. Now, if this city covered the entire Earth, what are these streets going to do at the North Pole? They're going to meet. So on a sphere, for example, there are no parallel lines on a sphere. The same thing is the case of space. So in the 1700s and the 1800s, people like Lobachevsky, Bolyai, and Karl Gauss realized that you could create geometries that didn't start from Euclid's presumptions. It didn't start from the idea that you could have parallel lines, that space was flat. They created other geometries. Lobachevsky created one where you could have multiple parallel lines, and none of them would reach. He even got Bessel, the astronomer, to help him test out whether this was true by making astronomical measurements to see if space was curved or not. He wasn't able to determine it. But in contrast to these guys, well, not Gauss, but Lobachevsky and Bolyai, they were what you might call non-Euclideans. They said, Euclid made these presumptions, and I don't agree with all of them. This one I don't agree with. And I'm going to make another geometry while changing this one assumption that he made. Riemann said, no, the problem isn't in having a wrong geometric assumption. The problem is starting from geometry in the first place. You're basically starting from perception, from appearances, from relations in space, as opposed to starting from physics. So Riemann worked out fully the total generality of different curved spaces. This is the work that was later used by Einstein in eliminating space and time as concepts with his theory of general relativity. But Riemann said, forget geometry. The only way you're going to provide a real foundation for understanding the relation of these things is in physics. What are the principles that cause everything to occur? That's the basis for understanding their relation.
So that's the key idea right there. Right? Is what is the causality? What the physics? What is the why? Why? That's what's important. It's not describing it or reducing it to a formalized structure of axioms, but the question is, why do these things happen? And yeah, go ahead, Andres.
So, in summary, what the bottom dwellers are saying is that matter times chance times time produces life.
You got it. I like that. That's good.
I do.
Yeah. And
Say that again.
Matter times chance times time equals life. If that's true, just look and see what happens to your apple on the dinner table if you leave it there for a week.
What is it again? I like that formula.
Matter times chance times time equals life.
well, what I really like about what you're saying there is when you include the idea of chance. Because what we're doing here is we're abolishing the casino universe that Wall Street has enforced upon us. This concept that we live in a universe that succeeds in a probabilistic sort of manner, where if there's such a thing as a God, these people would say God is rolling the dice, and whatever the outcome is, that's what we're dealing with. That there's a randomness to the world. This is a chaotic world where you cannot know the effects of your own actions, and you can imagine why they would want you to believe that. So they can say, well, we didn't know it was going to happen. We didn't know we were going to destroy the universe. Okay, so let's continue from there. So what Philo was doing is that he was actually a Hellenic philosopher. He was taking Plato, he was taking the ancient Greeks, and he was bringing them together with Moses, with the ancient Hebrew Bible, and he was showing that actually there is a continuity between them, and that this is so actually the way that Lynn is doing for us with Einstein. He's saying, well, look, Einstein goes all the way back to Euclid, and this is what we're talking about. This is what Philo is doing with Moses. He was saying, look, Plato goes all the way back to Moses. This is a continuous development of the same ideas. So these quotations I have in the next couple slides are from the treatise that I read by Philo on this, or to prepare for this, and it's called On Creation. And I was drawn to it because Megan Rillard, who is in Percival, she wrote a blog entry in which she drew from this. So let's see. Is there anyone who would like to read? Would someone like to give it a shot? Thanks, Robert.
So Moses, summing up his account of the creation of the world, says in a brief style, "This is the book of the creation of the heaven and of the earth, when it took place in the day on which God made the heaven and the earth. And every green herb before it appeared upon the earth, and all the grass of the field before it sprang up. Does he not here manifestly set before us incorporeal ideas perceptible only by the intellect, which have been appointed to be as seals of the perfected works, perceptible by the outward senses? For before the earth was green," he says that this same thing, verdure, existed in the nature of things, and before the grass sprang up in the field, it was grass, though it was not visible.
So what he's doing is he's looking at Genesis, and he's looking at the words of Moses, and he's analyzing them, and he's saying, okay, well, what he's saying here is that there is a principle of reason that governs the universe, that governs creation. That before you have the physical manifestation, you have the idea. You have the reason that comes prior. So here we go. Every green herb before it appeared upon the earth, and all the grass of the field before it sprang up. Before that is the book of creation, is the idea, is the reason. And you can see the connection, obviously, to Plato on this. That this is Plato's forms. And what he's saying is that if the idea comes first, then we do not have a progression of this Wall Street time, this animal time. There's a different space-time that we're talking about here. I'll get more into that. Yeah.
So is it saying that there's a concept of green independent of whether we actually have anything in the natural world that is green itself?
I would say how I'm trying to figure this out personally is that there is what he is saying is that before you have the unfolding of the material universe, in a sense, before time itself, there is the idea of time. There is before you have the physical manifestation, as you're saying, there is the idea. So I would agree with the way that you phrased that.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Green, you can define the concept of green
Uh-huh.
of a spectrum of light, and whether or not anything happens to be green. You could not experience greenness for quite a while. Doesn't mean the concept doesn't exist.
That's how I look at it.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how I see it. That's absolutely how I see it. And so this has major implications for the question of sense perception. So the fraud of sense perception per se here is that we must understand in the case of everything else which is decided upon by the external senses, there were elder forms and motions previously existing. And the emphasis on motions, I think, is key when we're talking about what Riemann has here about physics. It's not necessarily, it's the process is what I'm trying to communicate. We're looking at a process according to which the things which were created were fashioned and measured out. So let me say that again. We must understand in the case of everything else which is decided on by the external senses, there were elder forms and motions previously existing, according to which the things which were created were fashioned and measured out. For although Moses did not describe everything collectively, but only a part of what existed, as he was desirous of brevity, beyond all men that ever wrote, still the few things which he has mentioned are examples of the nature of all. For nature perfects none of those which are perceptible to the outward senses without an incorporeal model. So here he is, he's really exactly what Rick was expressing.
So he's saying what's primary is actual, the mind before everything else.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's the primary or the ontological moment.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that means if you think of a mind and a well-ordered mind, you study, you have a concept of your mind and a notion of its rationality and harmony and unity. Therefore, you realize that what's out beyond your mind, so to speak, the universe is a reflection of what your mind is.
That was beautifully put. Yeah, I like that. That means, thank you, Denise. That was good. Yes, Eugene.
Isn't he saying, in a sense, that these ideas that existed prior to when life came out and so on is like a blueprint? In other words, if you want to build a building, you have to have a blueprint of how it's to be built.
That comes up later.
And so on.
Yeah, I would agree with you perfectly, Eugene, and that's actually something that's an idea that's referenced later. So we'll get into that. So I wanted to include here. Some people I know they don't necessarily have internet. They don't get to watch these videos. Maybe you haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. But this is Jeff Steinberg's take on Obamagate, on the Watergate moment, and this is from the 12th. And then people know from Lewis's briefing the recent developments. So here is simply a oh yes, thank you. Yeah, of course. So we'll move ahead and we'll do it on here. And it's about a 20-minute video, which I highly recommend you watch all the way through, but we'll just do about the first
Hi, Jeff.
5 or 10
How are
minutes.
you? Good. I want to get right into it. Now,
All right, let me time these.
Well,
Makes it more fun. Makes it more fun. All right.
get this really bad lip syncing going on.
Okay.
hi, Jeff.
How are you?
Good. I want to get right into it. Now, Mr. LaRouche, yourself, and others now at this point have said that Obama has reached a Watergate moment. Now, there are a few indications of this I just want to kind of report to you and see what you think about. The first was a March 29th article in the New York Times, which discussed previously secret documentation on Obama's kill list and how he has been the so-called decider of which terrorists that are on that list who are going to live or die. There was another article that came out which exposed the fact that it was the Obama administration that not only developed but deployed cyber weapons in Iran, what's known now as the Stuxnet scandal. There's other things that have now come out after that. Obama has subsequently denied the fact that the administration leaked that. It's known now that it actually did come from Donald inside of the administration. You also have investigations being called for by people like Feinstein and others. This thing is really building up, Jeff, and what does this all mean? Why is this the Watergate moment?
Well, quite simply, it's a Watergate moment because, number one, the alleged crimes, since they're still just under investigation, but the alleged crimes that took place either at the White House, at the National Security Council, or maybe perhaps through the Obama campaign apparatus, are the kind of crimes that rise to the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. In other words, these are major breaches of U.S. national security that should not have happened. When a leak comes out, the automatic response of the relevant intelligence agencies is to do a damage assessment. Number one, we're not just talking about how much money it blew, but are there agents in the field, double agents working, say, inside Iran or inside Yemen, who are now maybe jeopardized. Their lives may be, in deep, deep trouble because of this leak coming out. So the intelligence community knew instantly that this was one of the worst patterns of leaks of ongoing classified operations that's ever taken place. And if it was done for crass political purposes, such as bolstering Obama's poll numbers at a point that he was in a crash and burn moment, then this really constitutes an act of betrayal that warrants his immediate removal. So, in the case of Richard Nixon and Watergate, I think that there's a critical overarching point that people don't always realize, but which was relevant both to the Nixon case and to the Obama case. Yes, there was a Watergate break-in, and the cover-up attempt around the Watergate break-in is what brought Nixon down. But before that happened, there was a broad consensus reached among leading people in the intelligence community and in both political parties that Nixon had crossed the line and was jeopardizing the survival of the republic. And I think that the thing that you have to realize in this case with Obama, that's what's happened in the recent period. We had the Libya war. We had the drone killings. We've had the kill lists. We've had the leaking of classified material. And in some cases, the Israelis have come out and said, hey, wait a minute, Obama didn't do Stuxnet, didn't do this cyber war against Iran. We did it, and the U.S. was a reluctant partner and only came in late in the game. So in some cases, they're making stuff up. They're taking responsibility for secret operations that they really didn't even do. But in some of those cases, they're blowing real live operations anyway. So this has reached a certain threshold point where you've got several factors that all tend to have to be in play to have the kind of perfect mix for a Watergate type situation.
So I'm going to stop right there.
So what are the other leaks aside from the Stuxnet, Fast and Furious, and the kill list?
Well, those are the key ones, but we can get into that. One of the major things I wanted to emphasize from that clip is what we're bringing to people with this methodology of thinking. When we go out in the field and we talk to people, everyone already knows about it. Everyone already knows about Obamagate. They all know about Fast and Furious. They already heard all about it on the news. It's even on The Daily Show. It's even on Jon Stewart, and he's making fun of him. So it's on every level, every spectrum. This is how widely known this is. But the question we have to give to people, the way we have to phrase things is, understanding the causality of it. What is the idea of the intervention? And not just describing it to them and just laying it out for them, this is what's happening, but why? And I'm going to circle back to that at the end of this part, of this second part. But that's what Jeff is really conveying there in his briefing, is the question of causality. Why? Why now? Why is this happening at this moment? And of course, we know this has everything to do with the collapse of the Eurozone. It has everything to do with the onrushing hyperinflationary breakdown, which is not something that any politician, as Finn was saying, it's not something you can ignore. It's not something you can ignore any longer. You have to pay attention to this. You have to be aware of this. And 3 years ago in April, Lyndon LaRouche said, here's why. Here's why you're going to see incredible brutality from Obama. It's because he's a failed personality, he's a Nero, he's a Hitler, and that he has been put into place as a puppet of the British Empire. This is why. And then we go deeper, and we see, why does this empire exist? It's because they've forced upon us the flawed, the fallacies, the reductionist fallacies of Euclid. That's essentially what we're investigating here.
How long ago, when was Gaddafi murdered?
That was October of last year.
It seems weird to me that they're all getting excited about this now. This, which is relatively trivial when you compare it to what happened in Libya and Gaddafi. It takes on, to me, it takes on like it's a weirdness, which goes back to what you said about you got to look behind it, what's really going on, tying it up with your.
There's something about a sense of the eerie in history that that Lynn has spoken about in the recent period that I don't really know what he means by that, but I have the same sense that you do. There's a sense of there's a quality here of something entirely different taking place, of things cascading downwards in a way that is unimaginable, where we cannot know how it's exactly going to play out. And this is a growing sense, I think, for political figures, for someone like Feinstein. Yes?
Yeah, like the words you just used in describing it and interpreting what this gentleman said, that whole cascade effect. I mean, it was like when Gaddafi was killed, I had said to a lot of my friends, I said, there's something wrong right now. And the murder of this particular individual, you're right, the sense of weirdness is there.
And I'd say that this cascade, that the key thing going on right now is that you do have leadership. You have Keisha Rogers, you have Diane Sayre, you have Bill Roberts, you have Dave Christie, you have Rachel Brown, you have Lyndon LaRouche. We're right there. And we've had the solutions the whole time, and we continue to push them. And the cascade that is coming down, what we're seeing here, and why LaRouche is saying you're looking at an imminent removal of Obama, that this could go very quickly, is that you have a lot of people who exist who are patriots. There are many people who have been who have been essentially cowardly. They haven't been able to face the reality. They're in the government. They're in various areas of society, and they're saying now, LaRouche was right, and this is the legitimacy that we have, and they're seeing that people are coming out against. They're seeing the courage and the ability to face reality that you're seeing in the Senate right now. This bipartisan effort, and they're saying that I can do it too. Now that there's been the first knife came out, now here's the swarm, and that's the cascade.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's almost not exactly tangible as well.
You know something, by the way,
Yeah. Lynn says it smells like Watergate. Yeah.
The killing of Bin Laden. Nobody saw the body. The body was so-called was dumped into the sea. So are we sure that he is really dead?
That's something further to definitely go into it another time. But I think you're also keying off of this sense of the eerie. So for this part 2, I wanted to talk that's something we can cap off there for a moment, and we'll return to a lot of that. But to go into another sort of mode here, and to address what I started out with when Lynn is talking about the essence of life, is the love of human creativity as such. Actually, I'll go back to that exact formulation because I didn't do justice to it. Life is, after all, the essence of creativity and of true love of the universal passion of creativity as such. The essence of creativity and of true love of the universal passion of creativity as such. So I want to preface this section by saying the joy of discovery, this is our weapon. And I'm going to show you why. Well, Lynn is going to show you why, but I'm going to begin with the opening chorus to Henry V, which Lynn has pointed to recently, I think back in February, possibly January, as being an important example of metaphor and of how the mind works. And I'm going to connect this to something that Philo says in On Creation. And there's a consonance between them. It's the same thing they're doing. So I want you to be prepared with the idea. This is the opening of the play. We're talking about Henry V, warlike Harry. We're setting the scene. I'm not going to go in depth into it, but what we have here is the chorus is presented by someone who's in sort of a traditional Greek sort of garb, chorus garb, as I understand it. This would be a common presentation of this, and there's nothing else on the scene. There's nothing else on stage except for the member of the chorus who is giving this opening speech. So. We'll talk to you about it later. It's good. You should read it.
Last word of their play.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, and gentles all, the flat unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place 1,000,000. And let us, ciphers to this great accompt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts, whose high upreared and abutting fronts, the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think that when we talk of horses, that you see them printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings. Carry them here and there, jumping our times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me chorus to this history, who prologue like your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. So we don't need to parse this. We don't really need to go into it. Let's just have that in our minds. And then, boom!
Nice.
Who knows what that is?
Big Bang.
Yeah, it's the Crab Nebula.
Why do they call it the Crab Nebula?
Looks like a crab.
Looks like...
It's not spiral. It's in the.
It's a supernova. It's not spiral.
Well, I want you to look at this image.
Zodiac.
I don't know. I'd be interested to learn. But I do want you to look at this image.
Somebody just said it's a Taurus.
Oh, it's a Taurus? Okay. Makes sense to me.
It's like a beetle.
I don't know what kind of beetles are walking around in your house. They're big. No. I think the my intention in putting this before you is to recognize that this is a picture of something that is wholly unimaginable. The Crab Nebula recently emitted the greatest burst of energy that we've ever recorded. But this is a cipher in your mind for that idea of this extraordinary development in creation that, although I describe it as unimaginable, that's the only place it could possibly exist, is in your imagination.
Is it true, I'm not sure of this, is it true that in the recent period that astronomers thought that the nebulas, the Crab Nebula, was just an exploding star? Is that what they...
I once again, I'm not an expert. I'm really not. But I would say, but I have heard that as well, that it's actually a birth of something new, that what you're seeing is creation. So, but my intention once again was to show you that we're looking at a picture of something that you could only possibly take on within your mind. This very concept of this entity is just beyond anything that I could represent for you. Any kind of image is, you're going to have to take it and you're going to have to do what Shakespeare says and multiply it. You're going to have to take this bare sense perceptual image and just go far beyond. So, yeah, that's what I think. So Philo goes into this. He says, Moses says that man was made in the image and likeness of God. And he says, well, for nothing that is born on the earth is more resembling God than man. And let no one think that he is able to judge of this likeness from the characters of the body. For neither is God a being with the form of man, nor is the human body like the form of God. But the resemblance is spoken of with reference to the most important part of the soul, namely the mind. For the mind which exists in each individual has been created after the likeness of that one mind which is in the universe as its primitive model, being in some sort the God of that body which carries it about and bears its image within it. in the same rank that the great governor occupies in the universal world, that same as it seems does the mind of man occupy in man. For it is invisible, though it sees everything itself. And it has an essence which is undiscernible, though it can discern the essences of all other things. And making for itself by art and science all sorts of roads leading in diverse directions, and all plain. It traverses land and sea, investigating everything which is contained in either element. And again, being raised up on wings, and so surveying and contemplating the air, and all the commotions to which it is subject, it is borne upwards to the higher firmament, and to the revolutions of the heavenly bodies, and also being itself involved in the revolutions of the planets and fixed stars according to the perfect laws of music, and being led on by love, which is the guide of wisdom, it proceeds onwards till, having surmounted all essence intelligible by the external senses, it comes to aspire to such as is perceptible only by the intellect. So here we're doing the same thing that Shakespeare calls on us to do. This is the same faculty that Philo is describing for you, is your ability of your mind to sensing the intelligibility of the universe. As Denise put it, you have this, sensing that our mind is a reflection of the creation of the universe, of the mind of that governs the whole. That you then have the ability to, your mind can go off into the heavenly bodies. Your mind can take you to the Crab Nebula. It can take you to Agincourt. It can take, and that's it. So here the key being that this is achieved because you are led on by love, which is the guide of wisdom. So returning to the methodology that Philo presents to us of looking for the why, the causality, the idea, the purpose, which is the elder form. Here you can see his indication about what the purpose is. What is the why? What is the ultimate why? Okay, so we're turn to this.
Is Watergate showing?
Yeah, this is Professor Stupid.
Hey,
okay. All right. So I wanted to return to the understanding that what we're talking about here is the very methodology of the LaRouche Riemann method. This is how Lynn is teaching us how he thinks. It goes to Philo and Euclid, and here is one more example of where we can just get another sense of how he was thinking and what that presented to us. What opportunity there.
Gotcha.
Thank you. What opportunity we have before us. Okay. Synchronize.
Oh, that's creepy.
What?
Okay, put it on 0, 0.
I said before.
No, hold on. Here, press pause and then pull it to 0. Oh, shoot. Okay. So nice you can hear it twice. All right, go.
I said before, and I can say it again. He has a Nero problem.
It's not going to sync.
He's a contemporary Nero. Famous kind of problem. And if you leave him in
Okay, last effort here. I have mine on 20. Put yours on a 20-second mark.
Here?
Does it say 0,
22.
0? Okay, I'll put mine on 22.
Put mine on 20.
Okay, play.
All right, yeah.
And if you leave him in there, you're going to find out the effect he's going to play. He's going to play the role of a Nero. He may not have the specific problems that Nero has, some of them, but he has this idea, this look, the one, and his self-adulation, his manic, euphoric self-adulation is the mentality of the worst kind of dictator. Don't let him get in the position where he has that kind of power. Keep him under constraint, the legal constraint within the American presidential system as it works. Keep him in that constraint. If you don't, you're creating a monster. You don't want a Frankenstein monster. You don't want a Narcissus in the presidency. And he's a case of Narcissus, just like Nero. And the program is basically that of Nero. He's a danger to all humanity if you don't keep him under control. He's a danger to himself as well as everybody else. So you ain't persecuting him when you're protecting him from himself.
That's fine. That's done. So, it's worth it to return to that repeatedly.
No, you just go down and then just click on it.
Oh, don't worry. Here we go. It's worth it to return to that repeatedly when we're discussing Lynn's methodology and what responsibilities it lays before us. The self-adulation that he indicates in that clip there, that is something he took up very recently in his most recent paper, his second most recent paper, Beyond Sense Perception. The question of the difference between lust and love. So these I could go on about that, but I'm going to return to what we have before us, which is the essential fallacy that we're attempting to eradicate, that is derivative of the oligarchical principle. The essential flaw of methodology is this principle that God is dead. And Philo attacked this 2,000 years ago. And he said, this is nonsense. And that's the kind of authority that Lynn is standing on when he makes his forecasts. He's drawing upon a history of philosophy. He's drawing upon the development of human thought and of human creative potential that goes all the way back to Moses. So here he says, here's Philo saying, for some men, admiring the world rather than the creator of the world, have represented it as existing without any maker and eternal, and as impiously as falsely have represented God as existing in a state of complete inactivity. So you can imagine God, like lounging by the beach or something, having created the world. He's created this clockwork orange, right? That's a way that people describe this clockwork world. He winds it up, he lets it go, and he just sort of waves bye-bye, and it winds down. That's what God is dead implies. That's the universe that they're attempting to force you to believe in service to the oligarchical principle. It would have been right, on the other hand, to marvel at the might of God as the creator and father of all. and to admire the world in a degree not exceeding the bounds of moderation. It's similar to what Lynn has said in the past. It's not that sense perception is all bad. You need it so that you don't fall into manholes. You need it, you need it so you don't fall off a cliff. But that should be within the bounds of moderation, what you believe sense perception is worth. Because what we must be looking at, when Philo is talking about the might of God, and when I'm talking about Moses, I'm really, I'm not being dogmatic in the slightest. I'm not talking about I'm not attempting to have a conversation about dogma at all. But what I am looking at, what we are attempting to do here is to marvel at the might of God as the creator and father of all, which is to say, to look at this concept of God as the principle of mind that governs the universe, which is the very understanding of the idea that what subsumes everything else is mind. And that is a principle of reason, that things happen for a reason, that they do not happen by accident. They do not happen probabilistically. It is not. We are not shooting craps. We're actually living in a creative universe that has certain laws that exist for a reason, and that we as human beings are compelled to pay attention to these laws, lest we go extinct. And really, there's a deeper purpose there, which I'm about to address. But go ahead.
So, are you saying that reductionism is in opposition to what you just said?
Yeah.
So, is it correct to say that the oligarchical principle is primarily characterized by reductionism?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it this way. When Nietzsche's one of Nietzsche's favorite things to say, he says, God is dead. He says, some people are slaves and some people are masters. And that's the way the world is. We live in a fixed universe. Nothing really changes. There's always going to be slaves and there's always going to be masters. And so he's describing the universe. He's describing the social world. And he's not looking at the causes. He's not saying, well, why is it like that today? And why is it that it should not be like that? He's just reducing it to an idea of a description. Well, this is how the world is today, so therefore that's the way it exists. That's what's going on. This is the same thing we talk about with Malthus. Malthus said that, here's the world, is we have limited resources, we're going to run out of them, that's that. Instead of looking at, well, why do humans need resources? Why do resources exist at all? Why does production exist? What is agriculture? He's not actually looking at the creation of resources. He's simply attempting to reduce it to a description, to a very sense perceptual understanding. Yeah.
So now we can appreciate the miracle of the American Revolution
Mm-hmm.
and what that brought about.
Yeah, and which was based on Leibniz's ideas, which connects straight back to what we're talking about.
What I was going to say, so essentially what we're looking at is some type of, can you say simply mind control?
No, absolutely. This is, the idea that God is dead, as we have expressed it here, is a type of. Lynn is addressing it as the primary satanic, essentially, mind control mechanism. That the because in order to get people to accept slavery, the oligarchical principle, you have to teach them justifications. And this is the justification. Well, why is it that you're a slave? Some people are slaves. So that's how it is. Mm-hmm.
I was just say, Philo says in one of his works, I believe it's on the Immortal, he says that slavery is evil, should not exist, but it's during the time of Christ, where basically everybody was a slave, you know. He basically says that because man is created in the image of God, that no man should ever be a slave. You just got that into my head.
So I'll wrap up here with the last couple slides. But do stop me if there's more to talk about. Yes?
Well, you're right. The universe is creative, and God is not dead. But there's a lot of human creativity going on too. But some things have to be reduced, like reductionism. For example, look at all the scientific truths that we found out, that all matter is made out of atoms, and it was discovered that electricity is the flow of electrons. And incidentally, it was a British physicist, Sir J.J. Thomson, who discovered the electron, you know, in his cathode ray tube. And, well, the physical reason why we stand on the floor and we don't go through the floor like a ghost would go through matter is because the electrons in the floor or ground are repelling the electrons in our shoes.
Well, what I would put to you...
like charges repel each other, and unlike charges attract each other. Like an electron will attract the proton of the opposite charge, and also the positron, its antiparticle, which also has a positive electric charge, like the proton. And all atoms are electrically neutral because there are just as many protons in the nucleus of each atom as electrons going around. So the positive charge of each proton cancels out the negative charge of each electron, and that's why all matter is electrically neutral. And thank God for that, because if it wouldn't be for that, we'd be shocked every second of the day. It couldn't be, you'd be electric.
That would suck.
All matter is electrically neutral, except for the stars, which are electrically.
Well, Eugene, what I want to do is I'm going to try to answer what you're talking about here in my final couple slides, because I do think that I have an approach on this.
No, but I'm not going against creativity.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think I really do. Okay, so here's Lynn, June 12th, 2012. Same day that we had the Obamagate stuff come out that Jeff was reporting on. That's when Jeff's report came out. You know, mankind's collective stupidity is amazing. We have all the things accessible to us with even a decent minimum of effort. There are things we can discover and enjoy discovering. I mean, the essence of science is the joy of discovering. It's not the rewards of discovering, it's the joy of discovering. And that's the only weapon that you can really, that's the only weapon you have that can really get you over the top. And to me, this goes straight to what Philo is saying. The guide of wisdom is love. So when you're reaching, you're continually to reach. Why? You're pulling the thread. Why? And it's because of the joy. And it's because of love. And that's how I would, this is how I'm looking at it. This is how I'm trying to access these ideas. And this is the continue to sort of address what Eugene is saying, that we cannot stop at any type of description. You never stop. It's not the joy of, well, now we know that we could be shocked at any moment, but it's the joy of continually saying, okay, well, what does that mean? And why that? And why this? And that continual and eternal process of discovery. And it's the joy of that differential, of that continual process. And I want to finish with a real concept of our future, which lies before us. And imagine this. Imagine that for 40 years, this organization has been fighting against Philo, against Euclid, has been fighting against Wall Street, has been fighting against the British Empire. And this summer, we can win. Many of us haven't been involved for all that long. Some of us have been involved the whole time. But we can win. And that's joy of discovery. That's an incredible amount of joy right there. And what it takes for us to win and what it represents for us to win is encapsulated in this statement from Lynn from about 2000. He says, what is needed is that people have to realize that we need the protection of law. The protection provided by a government and a legal system which is committed to the principle of agape, as in 1 Corinthians 13, for example, exemplifies that. We must act with love for mankind, love for the quality of man as an individual, which makes the individual in the likeness of the Creator. We must act accordingly, and whatever we do as a government, we must do accordingly. And if it's not done that way, it's wrong. This was 10 years ago. Lynn knew this. I mean, we had an understanding 10 years ago that the system was coming to a complete end. Lynn had an understanding of this 40 years ago. That's why we're here today. And we know today what it means that it's wrong, because we finally reached the point where we have a dictator in charge, who is a Nero, who in 2012 is on the verge of destroying civilization. But this is the moment before us, is that we remove the puppet, we judo chop the empire with the Glass-Steagall, and we move into a period where we have a government that acts on the principle of agape, which is explicitly what FDR was saying. Explicitly, he said this. And this movement, the people in this room, we are the ones who are not only responsible for that, but capable of doing it. And I want to draw this all in to say, I mean, this happens, this exists because of a love of mankind, a love for mankind, love for the quality of man as an individual, which makes the individual in the likeness of the Creator. And that this is the same thing exactly, almost word for word, that Philo was saying. So that gives you an incredible sense of the immortal fight that we're in, of the sense that we are in a battle for universal history that stretches back thousands of years. And I think that's a crucial understanding in terms of keeping your eye on the enemy. Because the enemy is the oligarchical principle and the resultant, the derivative reductive fallacies. The enemy is in the mind. That we are in this intense moment where Obama could go down in any immediate period. It could go down in the next weeks and months. And we cannot lose sight, because it's going to be harder. It's going to be an incredible fight. Achieving that, first of all, will be an incredible task, a Herculean task. But what you have to do is see beyond that to afterwards, where we're going to have just a incredibly chaotic country, where you have a potential, that is, for chaos. You have a potential for total confusion. And we need to have the solidity and of leadership, the measures laid out, the program laid out, and the very basis for it, and a very solid understanding of the basis for it, of the purpose. With that in mind, we can go to just untold beautiful futures. We can imagine Nuwapa being built. and what that would mean. Just like what you have to do is use that faculty that Philo and Shakespeare are talking about, where you're actually you're allowing your mind to traverse the land and the sea and the air and the heavenly bodies, and you're actually seeing and imagining for a moment there, in whatever degree you can, the progress of humanity into the solar system, into distant galaxies, the shaping of time and space. And that is the type of ambition that we must have if we are to succeed. We cannot have anything less than that eternal joy of discovery. And that's exactly how we're going to win. That's it. Sure, yeah.